Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming, and thank me for coming too. So, I'm going to talk from early times onward. Let's see what we got. Wow. All right. So this is a very early work. I started my life as a working class person, and I always had a very big urge to be an artist. I thought to be an artist was something very deep and spiritual, and I wanted to do this more than anything. And as you will know, I'm the same generation as the people in the UK who were instrumental in changing rock and roll. So there's a lot of that energy in me, and that was one of my options. But I wanted to do painting, which I thought was more profound and permanent and never aged. In fact, as it gets older, it gets seems to get more powerful, seems to accumulate something soulful. This is where I worked. And what's really interesting to me about this, which I hadn't noticed before, is the sign at the top. It says, artists, agents. And there it was. It was as if that sign was an angel. And I had to get to that. And as you can see, there's no space in this work. All space is filled in obsessively. I worked in lots of different jobs. I did cardboard boxes stacked up in trucks, terrible hard work, and typesetter in a factory, printing factory, and everything crowded out space. My work was all labor, and it's reflected in this. I found this recently, and I found it to be so interesting because my entire career is in that work. And I did it when I was 17. So it's a revelation to me. I thought that I would show it to you to start the talk off. That's me. In Morocco. And it was the year after the year. This was the year when we thought we could save the world by being hippies. And we would be able to bring Buddha and Jesus and Allah together. So they would all couple each other. We would all come together with peace, love, and understanding. All you need is love, which is still true today. All we need is love. So I went to Morocco. I met this Moroccan boy, and he said he would give me that jalaba if I let him drive my truck. So I did. And I slept in this, as you can see. I slept on the ground in this. I didn't sleep in the tent. It was extremely existential. And this is where I got my ideas, my visual ideas in Morocco. And when I got back from Morocco in '69, I believe, I made that painting. Now, before I went to Morocco, I was making scribble paintings, or gestural paintings. And when I came back, I made this very systematic painting. But what's also interesting to me about this is that I used a spray gun, because I always wanted to have a relationship with the proletariat. In other words, working class industrial materials. And the spray gun, which is, of course, what street artists use, was always in my work, and it's returned to my work again and again, periodically, because I like this relationship with the street, with industry, with working class materials. So this painting is a very fascinating mixture of high art and industrial art. And of course it's heavily influenced by the repetition of the world of Islam. You know, when I was in Morocco, I saw all these looms in the back of houses. All the people had looms. Very, very beautiful. And it fascinated me. So I started weaving my paintings, more or less, or layering grids, one on top of the other. Oh, sorry. There. This one is another one that I made as soon as I got back. And what I wanted to do, it was to take the mechanisms of order, which is coming from constructivism, and in a sense ruin it. It's called backcloth. So it relates to what's at the back here, which is gestural painting, and the systems are laid on top of one another until order makes chaos. I was interested in using order to destroy itself. So this picture that picture is out of order. So I'm going to go back to it. And this is what people look like before the internet. And as you can see, they're quite similar to us. And I mean, probably more beautiful than the current model. But we haven't changed much. This is taken in Yugoslavia. When I came to Yugoslavia in 1968, a country held together by the force of Tito. And I was very interested in communism, because I thought communism was really great. And over time, of course, I changed my mind. But as you can see, I was quite happy to be in Yugoslavia. This was very impacting for me, Dubrovnik, because the stone, which is the result of everything being compressed over time, leaves, wood, bodies, forests, ice, resulting in stone, is an extraordinarily ancient and fascinating material, which of course takes many millions of years to make. And I love the way that the stone is geometricized. The foot, of course, is made out of limestone. And I walked around on the top of this, when I looked like that guy in that picture. And it really made a big impact on me, on the way that it had space inside and walls, and huge, unmeasurable space outside, by a simple intervention of bringing the stone out of the ground. And this affected my attitude towards sculpture making later on, many years later on. But I store all these memories through travel. This painting is called Fort, which of course obviously relates to the image before. Now these were the paintings that I was making in New York when I wanted to be assimilated. And my dad, who was an immigrant of course, said to me one day, "When in Rome, do as the Romans," which is the responsibility of all immigrants, to assimilate themselves, to make that effort, to assimilate yourself. So if you go to Spain like I did, learn Spanish. And I assimilated myself into New York by taking on minimalism, which was the art of the day in the early 70s. I was very attracted to its austerity and, in a sense, its morality. And obviously it comes from European constructivism and suprematism, but I always had this relationship with night light, so the romantic in me was never expunged. And even though my paintings were minimal, they were always poetic in some way. And they were always in some sense figurative, because this is called Fort, which is based on the idea of a Roman fort. This is my sculpture now. So you can see, oh, that's me again. You can see that this stayed in my mind very strongly. So I came to Yugoslavia to get something, and I did. Well, you get something from anywhere, but I like to get things from rough places. And Yugoslavia was certainly a rough place. It was very different to Croatia. Anyway, so I returned to this piece of sculpture that is now in Yorkshire. And this sculpture is made from stone from Yorkshire. So it's just a question of moving the stone from one place to another that's not far away. I think the relationship for me between the stone and where it comes from is extremely important. So what I wanted to make, in a sense, was something that was like a temple. And the spaces between those blocks are spaces that are your length of your arm. So you can walk through and touch both sides. This is, of course, coming from a lot of my experiences in Mexico. You know, I got super interested in the ruins of Mexico, which is in fact why I learned Spanish. And I drove around all over Mexico trying to touch the soul of all these people that went before us. This is very deep in me, the idea of touching people that have already passed this way, that we can learn something from. And we are here because of them. They made it possible for us, and we hopefully make it possible for the next generation, providing we don't fuck it up. And you'll see in these blocks there are windows and doors, but they're all pushed in. And the idea of these blocks is that the space is compressed. Exactly like the drawing that I showed you at the beginning. There's no relaxed, open space in my work. It's all filled in. This is called coin stack. My dad was a barber. Snip, snip. And when you're a barber, 50% of your income is tips. So every Friday night, he would come home and then he would make these stacks of coins. And we would watch anxiously because the stacks of coins signified the security of where we lived, of keeping our house. So they became extremely important to me. And when I started making sculpture, I wanted to make a coin stack. So I made these, which are really an homage to that story. So once again, my work isn't really that abstract. It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. Because that's really a sculpture of that memory of the coin stack. And of course I wrote a poem to go along with it. Because he would make these towers on the table. And I saw them in my young child's mind as monumental. And I've made quite a few of these. This is New Grange. Has a big relationship, of course, with Dubrovnik. However, New Grange is a lot older. It's 5,000 years old, and it's the world's oldest building in Ireland. And what's really fascinating about this is that the roof is still working. The stones are still keeping the inside dry. Now, of course, you'll probably all know the story of New Grange, right? Does anybody not know it? Oh, okay, see me later. No, I'll tell you now. So, you know, that doorway in the middle is perfectly placed for the winter and summer solstice. And the sun comes in and hits the altar at the back. It was mathematically calculated because they worship the sun. And we should too, because it gives us everything we need. So as you can see, the issue of stone is very profound, and it's got all these beautiful markings on it. These what are they called? What? No, that's a description. What are they called? Try something. Anyway, it's quite bound up with endless regeneration is the idea, and all those stones around there are drawn on. It's an incredible place. I had the great privilege to be there before it was fixed up, but of course they couldn't leave it unrepaired forever. But when I went, you could walk inside, and it was an incredible experience because you're inside and there's a hole running through it. And then in the back is a little urn like this, made again of stone. Very geometric. You know, these are 5,000 years old, and this is geometric abstract art right there, just like Paul Klee. And there's my sculpture again. Now I have to go all the way back, sorry. Nice, huh? So, this painting I made in 1981, called Backs and Fronts. And it was made exactly the following year after the previous painting that I showed you called Fort. And to get from that to that took quite a lot of energy. But it occurred to me that if painting were to survive, or certainly abstract painting were to survive, it had to revitalize itself. And something had to be broken, which was the hegemony of minimalism, the domination of a certain kind of puritanical policing of what you could do, what you couldn't do in a painting. And this was very strong in New York, because America is essentially based on Puritanism, which is why it is so extreme and so judgmental. This is a strength and a great weakness, and it resulted in the dead end of minimalism, which of course comes from suprematism. But suprematism had a great political and quasi-religious aspect to it. Minimalism was extremely authoritarian, and we were all under it. And the whole art speak around it enforced it implacably. So there was a kind of tyranny at work in New York. I made this painting, and it was shown at PS1 in a very important exhibition called Critical Perspectives, which was a kind of show and tell exhibition. It was like a mini Olympic Games of art in New York, curated by 6 famous curators. And I was in one room, and I had this, which confused everybody, except the musicians, because it was the time of punk, which was repetitive guitar work, and the punk musicians absolutely adored it. But the painters were confused by it, of course. Now it's basically figurative. I started out thinking about Picasso's 3 musicians, and that's the left part of the painting, but then I kept adding figures. And I thought of these as being figures and having the same kind of proportion as my body. A lot of these panels are like bodies. And then of course I included all different kinds of painting. Some of the painting is precise and some of it's not. And the colour is wild, it doesn't make any sense. So you have to see this in relation to systematic art, because this is systematic art that's broken down or opened up. So I included metaphor, broken edges, relationships, a reference to figure called Backs and Fronts. It makes a reference to standing figures. And it was shocking at the time that it was made. And it wasn't that long before other painters started putting relationships back in, because minimalism expunged relationships. It was non-relational painting, didactic, or extreme, ultimate painting is what it was often referred to, or absolute painting. And I found it to be absolutely dead end, and somebody had to change it. So, very shortly after that, I made this painting called Maesta, which is relating to European painting. And it has the sense of a body being held in by angelic figures that are less colourful, less inhabited by the colour of earthly life, and more coloured spiritually or abstractly. And it bulges out in the middle and nothing quite fits. So I made all these pictures around the early 80s with relationships that didn't make any sense in the mathematical sense of things. This is another painting, very important painting for me, that I made back then. It's called Blame. And you know that Jean-Paul Sartre's idea of hell was 3 people in a room, all blaming each other. And so you had these personalities or bodies locked together for eternity in a dialogue of blame, which seems quite current. And I made, again, things that didn't fit together. I also thought of them as being like portraits of the city. And I found New York to be a city of blame and envy. It ran on blame and envy, and it still does. So there's an endless irresolvability about this painting. It's endlessly moving. It never achieves stasis. And as you can see, there's different kinds of painting, expressionistic painting. Or as Arthur Danto said, what I did was he said, it was the way that I brought the achievement of abstract expressionism into the current world. Not that I just brought abstract expressionism into the current world, but the way in which it was done. And I did it in a sense by making the painting sculptural. Or another person described them as the energy of abstract expressionism cubed. This is another painting from the same period. This one's called The Bather. So again, I'm putting the figure back into abstraction, insisting on abstraction as metaphorical and referential, or in other words, less remote, less abstract. So I basically put everything in that had been taken out. Well, not everything, because I didn't put the figure back in literally, but you can see there's very, very strong references to nature. Rivers and trees, and a figure bulging out in the middle. So it's kind of a crazy painting. This is a painting that's very austere. It's a picture I made when I first got some money together. I bought a house in London, and it was the first time I ever owned anything. And I painted in the house, actually. I didn't have a studio. And I made this painting as an homage to my son, who died, which caused me immeasurable grief. He died in '83. And it was very interesting because in '83, if you look at my paintings, you can see that the colour dips by about 20%. It's as if somebody had a dimmer and lowered the colour. And it's only recently that the colour in my work has returned, and that's after over 30 years. So this one is called Empty Heart. So again, it's the idea of a figure in a painting, or a painting in a painting, or a window, but it's an insert. It's a made thing that's pushed into the painting. It's not simply painted into place. So they were hugely physical paintings. And I would bang the insert in. And I likened it the other day to Fontana, who slashed the monochromatic painting. So it's like you drive to the end of a cul-de-sac, and then you've got to do something. So he slashed it open. I thought it was very interesting. And this is similar to what I was doing. Of course, there's a great tradition of paintings inside paintings. And when I was working in a printer course, you know, sending rows of type, I would insert intaglio plates into a body of metal type. And this has stayed with me, of course, because it's like a little sculpture that will result in a print. It's a very beautiful thing, you know. I used to have little letters made of metal. You know, the letter would be on the top, and the rest of it would be a column which you drop in. It was extraordinarily labour intensive. And I used to work from 8 AM to 6, setting type. And the rows in my work, of course, are coming from these days of very hard labour. This is more recent. And as you can see, finally, after many decades of twilight and grey and black, funereal colours, brighter colour has returned. And these I was thinking about in relation to Van Gogh, because I love this use of yellow in Van Gogh. And what you can see here is that each painting is a picture of the painting before, or the painting next door. In other words, they're all similar, but painted differently. So in another way, one can look at it as a lesson of the endless possibilities of painting. Because in painting, you can never repeat yourself. It can be repetitive, or as an English art critic described me, monotonous, because the English, you know, they love a portrait. You give them a portrait and they're so happy. But they don't know anything about this kind of painting. And this kind of painting relies on, of course, repetition. But if you look at the painting, it's not repetitive, because all the edges are different, all the relationships are different, and it draws out another kind of emotion. I liken myself on occasion, musically, I would say, to Arvo Pärt. Arvo Pärt, I think, is a wonderful composer. And I made a little homage to Arvo Pärt recently called Spiegel in Spiegel, Mirror in Mirror. And Arvo Pärt, who lives in Estonia, a place that is fascinating to me, makes paintings that have a relationship to minimalism, but he adds pathos, sentiment, emotion, and tenderness. His work is nowhere near as serialized as the American counterparts, like Philip Glass, who don't question the system very much. Our part is always pouring pathos into this system, trying to make it human again. And this is very similar to what I do. Well, the intention is very similar. And this is called, I believe, Al Arland Vincent. This is where I live. I mean, I don't live in the water. I live in a house. But I can walk down there with my dog in 10 minutes. And this is a mighty river. The only river I know that has spawned the name of an art movement. Maybe I missed something, but as far as I know, it's the only one. It's Hudson River School. And the Hudson River, of course, is an estuary. And this distance is something like 5 kilometers. It's monumental and somehow eternal. Very beautiful river. In great condition too, by the way. Because we go there on school trips and we have to measure the acidity and the cleanliness, and it comes out high. They've really done a wonderful job cleaning it up, and it's teeming with wildlife. It's a fantastic river. I'm very fond of it. This is Germany's most adored painting. Caspar David Friedrich, Moved by the River. Look at the sky. Wow. The sky is almost like cloth coming down on top of that mountain. And there's the monk. So the monk in this painting is the bridge between the two worlds. Well, that's the idea. And in the painting, the monk stands on the edge, and half of the monk is on the land and the other half is against the water. This is one of my fairly recent paintings called Landline, where I make a very strong reference to nature, which I think is now a subject of existential importance for us, because we have managed to bugger up the world big time with plastic fantastic. And I've moved back in my work to referencing nature, because I want to point to it, to show a kind of love for it. But the question is, how can you make a painting that is fundamentally sentimental, like mine, and make it durable in the art world? And I know lots of artists, wonderful friends of mine, who make landscape paintings that actually don't mean anything anymore, or they don't mean anything to anybody else anymore. And these friends of mine work in isolation, and people don't show their paintings. So what I've tried to do with my work always is to bring it into a dialogue with contemporary structure. And these are repetitious paintings. They deal with repetition, they deal with serialization, but they're not owned by it. They're not dominated by it. So it's always a pushback. All the color in my work is made on the surface, And then you see these edges, which I think are, of course, metaphors for the way things in the world come together. And if things in the world don't come together in the right way, or in a way that's conciliatory enough, you get Ukraine. So I'm thinking about these relationships, and they're very important to me in the work. That's why in my work there aren't any hard edges. There are panels banged together, that's true, but the edges of the painted stripes or bars or bands are usually negotiated with a very strong sense of poetry. These are called landline, so that they make a reference to the land. And the colours of nature, of course, like the sky, deep green like the forest. And of course I'm not painting a landscape, but I'm painting an abstract painting that yearns to be a landscape, or to touch a landscape. This is the back of my studio in New York. And I made that because it's an homage to Monet, because Monet's back garden has this Japanese bridge in it. So I got this guy to make me a bridge like that, and I got rid of all chemicals. I mean, when I got this, you know, it was full up with rubbish, and we cleaned it all up. It's 2 hectares, 2.5 hectares. It's not huge, but it's full up with wildlife. All the animals come back because the animals are not stupid. They know where to go, they don't need us. We've got snakes, turtles, rabbits, of course, and beautiful little birds flying around. So I like to walk down here in the morning and stand on that and then go and paint. So I'm very fortunate. There's the Monet. When I was young and I wanted to be an artist, I used to make copies of paintings. And I used to, you know, take an art book out of the library and then I'd make a copy from a copy, or from a photograph. And I made a copy of the Monet with the Japanese bridge that went from side to side. There's several versions of this. This is the wrong one, but the one that I made the copy of is the symmetrical one, where the bridge divides the painting, and that painting is in Philadelphia, where I just had my retrospective. So it was a bit like a fairy story. So I copied the painting, and then of course I lost it. Like, I lost nearly all my paintings because I had no money to look after them. And I ended up showing in the same museum. It was quite beautiful. This is another one you'll see in the exhibition, another landline painting, hotter. But all these colours are the colours that you can really only have in painting. They're bright and not bright, and they're bound to the body of the material. This is very big in my work. The physicality in my work is enormously important. Oh, yeah, that's the last thing. So, this is a recent painting, and what I've done here, in a sense, is return to the idea of street art, or spray gun art, and put these 3 panels together, and then I put the windows in relation to them and move them around. This one here was down over there somewhere. I think it was where the blue one was, on the left, and I took it out and moved it on the other side. So you have all these things that are floating and that are kind of in the wrong place, which is an obsessive subject for me, the idea of movement, passenger, immigration, emigration, which is of course rampant in our world, and it will become more so as we make more people unhappy, particularly in the South. So all these things are where they are now, but you get the feeling that they could be somewhere else. So these relationships are provisional. So in a sense they are like immigrants, displaced paintings inside another painting. So the painting is based on a kind of argument of overload. This is San Giorgio Maggiore in Venice. I put this sculpture in there and I didn't realise it was going to work out so great. But it was fantastic because it's made of felt. I was thinking about what to do in this church and, you know, have some relationship with the church, with Catholicism. Not a narrative relationship, but to respect the history of the church and to use it in some way. And what I found was that the material, the felt, because these are hoops covered in felt. The felt took all the light out of the room. It's not lit. It lights itself. It was quite extraordinary. And then when you go inside it, you're in a silent chamber because it takes the sound too. Felt is very absorbent. And the other thing that I love about felt is it's not woven, it's pressed. So it has a special sort of magic quality as a material. And you can see that the whole church is a concert of materiality. Marble, stone, glass, metal, with this felt tower inside that seemed to suck up all the light that was available in the church. Oh, okay. I thought it was over. But, all right. I made these paintings recently. Very strange for a quasi-American artist. I asked a friend of mine, tell me another artist, another American artist that has made a detour into figuration and returned to abstraction. And she said Philip Gaston, which is wrong, because Philip Gaston never came back. And Philip Gaston said a very interesting thing. He said, when I got to the top of the mountain of abstraction, I realised I forgot something. So I went down again to figuration. It's this old argument. And I didn't. I got to the top of the mountain and I realised I had everything I needed. But when you have a child, especially after what happened to me, everything changes. And, you know, my kid is playing on the beach down in the island where we go. And I was taking photographs, but I thought that photograph wasn't enough. And I wanted to do something to stop time. So I made a series of paintings of him playing on the beach and his mother behind him. And what I like about this one is that her hat looks like a gun. So she looks like a bodyguard or a bird. Anyway, they're full of stuff like this. I also noticed at the end of it that his arms were different colours, because his two arms were doing different things. So I made them different colours. So the paintings were full of all these little mysteries. And then when I finished making these, there's about 23 of them, I just returned to abstraction. And I haven't shown these in America. Well, I showed a couple of them, and people were confused. So I decided not to show them anymore in America. But I showed them in Europe, because Europe, the difference between European art and American art, from what I see, is that American art is very refined and involved in certainty. Prime example of this would be Agnes Martin or Ellsworth Kelly. And European art is significantly more flexible and nuanced, and it operates between spaces or between points of definition. And I believe this is why Germany now is so important for the art of painting. Oh, yeah, I think this is the last. Oh no, it's not the last one. So this one I thought was fun, a bit crazy. I'm questioning the difference between abstraction and figuration. So I put an abstract painting next to a figurative painting, and I took part of one and put it in the other, and part of the other and put it in the first one, which is, of course, the psyche of an immigrant or a traveller, which I am. And it's questioning what is what. It's muddling everything up. And now we come to the good part of the lecture. The really fun part. Oh no, it's this one. This painting is a painting I made in Berlin. And I really like it. I made it in the afternoon. And there was beautiful light that was coming in while I was painting it. It seemed to suit the painting so beautiful. And it's a painting inside a painting, of course, which is what I do, and which I have done for a long time, as a way of enlivening painting and putting the figure back in, putting the metaphor back in, putting the discord back in, putting the difficulty back in, and ultimately the humanism back in. And of course it's a painting that's made by somebody with a deeply romantic soul. It's a wall of light inside a landline. And the colours are made on the painting. The colour at the bottom I made by putting some of the brown on the blue. It made this incredible, strange colour. And all my paintings are full of colours that you can't name. And they have about them a very strong sense of the physical, which I've mentioned before, And this inset is full of rough imperfections, and it's called wall lantline, like all the others that I've done. And this one is called something pool. Sorry?
Pool dusk.
Dusk. Thank you very much. And dusk is actually my favourite time of the day, because dusk isn't day and it isn't night. And my paintings very often occupy this space between this and that, which I feel is central to the use of art, which is what art should do. It gives wonder, pause, space, and as far as I know, it's never killed anybody, except the painter Barna of San Gimignano. Barna, who is a Renaissance artist, not on the A-list, but a very good painter, finished this beautiful church in San Gimignano. And he stepped back and fell off the scaffold and died in great happiness. So I think now I have come to the end of my lecture. Thank you.
Does anybody maybe have a question that they would like to ask?
While you have, oh sorry, does anybody have a question to ask the author while you have the chance? If you won't be able to catch me later in the space.
No? Okay, good.
Everybody wants one-on-one.
No, actually, I once went to a rock concert to see the Talking Heads. David Byrne was wearing this crazy felt suit, and at the end of the rock concert he said, "Any questions?"